My name is Adrian Pike. I am 66 years old, a widow for almost 9 years now. I spent my working life as an elementary school secretary. I know my way around forms, filing cabinets, and long silences. I live alone in the same cedar-sided house my husband Harold and I bought when the kids were little. In my pocket, I still keep the brass house key from those days, tied to a fraying red ribbon my daughter Nora gave me when she was in 3rd grade. It makes the faintest ting when I walk. I have always liked that sound. It reminds me that a door half closed is still a door, and I get to choose if I go through. This morning, an envelope waited in my mailbox, wedged between a grocery flyer and a charity appeal. Inside was a letter from my health insurance provider. It stated, in careful legal print, that my coverage had been canceled, at the request of my new legal guardian. My hands shook, but my eyes stayed clear. Because I knew. I had never signed anything. I stood in my kitchen, the tile cool under my bare feet, and let the paper rest on the counter. That sound, paper on wood, took me back exactly 1 week. It was a Thursday morning, the kind that smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was still bright. I was walking past my son Caleb's house on Alder Street. His lawn was trimmed into perfect green stripes, the way his wife Sloane likes it. That is when I noticed a car parked in his driveway that did not belong there. A green Subaru. Nora's car. My daughter's. I slowed down. Nora was supposed to be at the dental clinic where she works. I had baked 2 apple pies that morning, one for Grace at the diner, and one I thought I might leave for Caleb, and maybe say hello to whoever was inside. It was not unusual for family to visit each other, but something about seeing that car in the driveway, with all the curtains drawn, made me hesitate. I walked up the path. The porch smelled faintly of Sloane's lavender polish. The front door was not fully shut. It was resting against the frame, latch not quite caught. I raised my hand to knock. That is when I heard it. Once she signs the POA, we file for conservatorship right away. The words were in English in real life, but they carried the same weight in my mind. Once she signs the POA, we file for conservatorship right away. It was Sloane's voice, smooth as silk pulled across a blade. Then Caleb, lower. She won't ask. She's tired, forgetful. She's ready to be guided. And then, almost too quiet to catch, Nora. I'm not sure this is right. Sloane again, sharper now. Nora, this is protection. Her money is evaporating. We are just helping her do the right thing. My breath caught. The word protection burned in my ears. I let my arm fall back to my side. The pie felt heavy in my other hand. I stepped backward, careful not to let the porch boards creak. The brass key in my pocket gave the tiniest ting as I turned away. I walked quickly past the hedges, across the street, my heart beating hard enough to hear. By the time I reached my own front steps, my legs felt like they did not belong to me. I went inside and locked the door. For a long time, I stood in my hallway, listening to the house breathe around me. I know what protection looks like. I know what love sounds like. And I knew, in that moment, that whatever they were planning was neither. Back in the present, I picked up the insurance letter again. Someone had already moved further than I realized. The term legal guardian stared back at me from the page, black on white, formal and undeniable. It was not a conversation anymore. It was paperwork. Paperwork can be fought. Paperwork can be traced. I slid the letter into a manila folder. My hand brushed the brass key in my pocket again. Ting. I thought of Nora's voice at that doorway, small but present. I thought of Caleb's tone, factual, almost casual, about guiding me, and Sloane's certainty, as if the matter were already decided. I poured myself tea I did not drink. Outside, a thin wind rattled the dry leaves against the gutter, the same wind that had been on Alder Street that morning. I realized my first step would not be to confront them. Not yet. My first step would be to find out exactly how far they had already gone. I picked up the phone. The number I dialed was not family. It was someone who still remembered me from the school days, someone who knew the weight of a missing document or a misplaced signature. And as the line began to ring, I told myself one thing, out loud, in my own kitchen. They think they are holding the key, but they don't even know which door it opens. The brass key in my pocket made a sound again. Ting. Software certain. And I knew I was about to use it. I have lived in this house for over 30 years. Cedar siding. A small, wraparound porch Harold built himself, and a kitchen that has been the center of more holidays than I can count. It is quiet now. Too quiet sometimes. The kind of quiet that settles in when the children have moved on, and you no longer wake up to the sound of someone else's footsteps in the hall. I am 66 years old. A widow. Harold's heart gave out one winter morning while he was clearing snow from the driveway. We had plans for that spring, fixing the fence, taking the train to visit friends in Oregon. I went back to work after the funeral, partly for the paycheck, mostly for the routine. Being an elementary school secretary suited me. I knew every parent by name, every child's allergies and birthdays. I could handle a ringing phone and a hallway full of crying kindergartners without missing a beat. Even now, certain objects in this house carry the weight of those years. The dent in the lower kitchen cabinet where Caleb, at 12, dropped a heavy pot trying to help with dinner. The table runner with a crooked hem that Nora sewed in home economics, proud enough to insist we use it for Thanksgiving. Family photos line the hallway. Caleb in his graduation robe, Nora on the balance beam, Harold holding Ellie as a newborn. I keep them dusted, not because I am sentimental, but because neglect makes things disappear faster than loss. The people still in my life, the ones I trust, form a small circle. Marisol Vega is part of that circle. She works at the local bank branch now, but I knew her long before. Her daughter was in Mrs. Wilkins's third-grade class, and I once called Marisol at work because her little girl had left her lunchbox at home. She remembered that. Marisol is practical, quick with numbers, and quick to spot when something is out of place. She is also one of the few people I know who will tell me the truth, even if it is inconvenient. Then there is Grace. She owns the diner 2 streets over, the kind of place where the coffee is always hot and the pie is never perfect, but always tastes like it should. Grace has a way of cutting through pretenses with a single sentence. She once told a councilman his handshake felt like a wet paper towel. She makes me laugh, which is rarer than it used to be. My daughter Nora, she has a soft heart, softer than mine ever was. She means well, but she listens too closely to whoever is speaking last. That makes her vulnerable to people like Sloane, who can make manipulation sound like concern. Nora works long hours at a dental clinic. She is good with patients, and I believe she wants to do right by me. But wanting and doing are not always the same. Anita Patel, my lawyer, is another anchor. We met years ago at a library book fair. She was speaking about women navigating small business contracts, and I liked how she explained things without making anyone feel foolish. Anita does not waste words. She listens fully before she answers, and when she does, her advice is precise. In her line of work, precision is a form of defense. Jonah Keats is someone Anita brings in when discretion matters. You would mistake him for a reference librarian, neat sweater, careful manner. But he is the kind of person who can follow a trail of digital breadcrumbs until they lead to the source. He believes in evidence, in the chain that connects what someone does to what they meant to do. Dr. Phoebe Hart is a newer acquaintance. Anita recommended her as an independent geriatrician, someone who evaluates mental capacity without bias. She has a voice that makes you feel like you have time to answer fully, even if her schedule is tight. She reminds me of the best teachers I worked with, those who understood that listening often tells you more than any test. And then there is Ellie, my granddaughter, Caleb's daughter, 7 years old and already taller than I was at her age. She has a way of drawing houses with too many windows and gardens that spill beyond the page. In her world, no one forgets to invite you in, and every table has enough chairs. She is the reminder that not everything has been spoiled. Not yet. As I move through my home, I touch these memories. The dented cabinet, the crooked hem, like checking an old map. I know where I have been. I know who has stood beside me, and I know who is standing there now. This circle is small, but it is enough. I have learned that the right few are worth more than a crowded room. Each of them holds a different kind of key. Marisol can lock down a bank account before the wrong person touches it. Grace can read a motive in the space between words. Nora can choose the truth, if she is shown it plainly. Anita can dismantle a false claim with 3 lines of legal code. Jonah can retrieve what others thought was erased. Dr. Hart can confirm, in writing, that my mind is my own. And Ellie holds the key to why I bother to fight at all. In the days ahead, each of them will matter. I do not yet know exactly how, but I know enough to start paying attention, because once a door is forced open, you cannot simply close it again and pretend it is secure. You either fix the lock or you change the key entirely. The brass key in my pocket presses against my palm. Ting. The ribbon is faded, but it still holds. The morning after the insurance letter arrived, I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee gone cold and my laptop open. I told myself I was only going to check my email. That was a lie. I was looking for proof. It started with my estate management portal. I do not log into it often. There is rarely a reason. But the moment the dashboard loaded, I saw something that stopped me. 2 login entries I did not recognize, both from last week. One was labeled Document Download. The other said, Electronic Signature Completed. My breath tightened. I had not opened that file, let alone signed it. I clicked through the history. The document in question was a revision to my estate plan. Several asset allocations were altered, directing more to Caleb and Sloan, less to Nora and Ellie. There was nothing in my files indicating I had authorized any change. And yet there, in digital black and white, was my name on the signature line. The next stop was my bank account. I scrolled through the most recent transactions and found 3 entries that looked harmless at first glance. Each was under $500, small enough not to raise the automatic fraud alerts. All 3 were to an account I did not recognize, labeled with vague descriptions: logistics, estate review, consulting. I felt the first cold drop of certainty. This was deliberate, and it was not just in my imagination. My eyes drifted from the glowing laptop screen to the worn surface of my kitchen table. For a moment, the present blurred, and I was back 15 years earlier. The light over the table was warm then, the bulb casting a yellow circle across the pages of my ledger. I used to sit there after dinner with a pencil in hand, calculating and recalculating so that Caleb could attend the architecture summer program in Chicago, so that Nora could stay in ballet for another year. I remember skipping new shoes one winter, patching the old ones instead, because there was a tuition deadline to meet. The pencil marks were neat, the columns aligned, but every number represented a choice. Back then, it didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like the natural order of things. Parents make it work. Children take the opportunity and run with it. I blinked and the ledger was gone. The table was bare except for my coffee and the laptop that now showed me just how much someone was willing to take. I reached for the phone. Marisol answered on the second ring. "Adrienne, hey, what's going on?" Her voice was brisk, but warm. "I need you to help me secure my accounts," I said. "And I need you to do it quietly." There was a pause, the kind where you can hear someone deciding whether to ask more questions. Marisol chose not to. "Okay. First, we put a monitoring flag on your accounts. Anything unusual will ping me directly. Second, I want you to activate two-factor authentication for every login you have. Bank, estate portal, email. Use your phone, not email, for the codes." She walked me through each step. The process was clinical, a checklist, but each click felt like a brick sliding into place, shoring up the walls. By the time we were done, she had sent me an email confirming the security updates and a note in her matter-of-fact way. "If anyone tries to make a move now, we'll see it." I thanked her and hung up. For a while, I just sat there, letting the quiet settle. Outside, the sky had shifted to a thin overcast. I pushed my chair back, crossed the room, and opened the bottom drawer of the sideboard. Inside was a small wooden box. I lifted the lid, and there, resting on a scrap of linen, was the brass house key with its faded red ribbon. I picked it up and felt the familiar weight in my palm. The ribbon was frayed at the edges, but it still held. I closed my fingers around it. They might have tampered with my signature. They might have rerouted my money in amounts too small to trip the alarms. But I still held this key. I still decided which doors I opened. And that, I told myself, was where I would start. The letter came in a thick cream envelope with my name in careful block print. I slid it open with a butter knife and unfolded 3 stapled pages. "Notice of temporary hearing," it read, with a date, a courtroom number, and the petitioner's names: Caleb Pike and Sloan Pike. My son, my daughter-in-law, petition for conservatorship. I read the first paragraph twice, then the second twice more. The language was precise and cold. It spoke of confusion, irregular payments, and the need for immediate authority. I set the letter down and filled the kettle, then noticed the burner was cold. The fridge hummed like it was holding its breath. I leaned on the counter and asked myself the question I didn't want to ask. What if this was love, twisted into paperwork? What if they believed they were protecting me? Caleb liked checklists. Sloan liked plans. Nora followed whoever sounded sure. Maybe they told themselves moving fast was mercy. But I had seen the portal logins. I had seen the revised allocations, the small transfers labeled like errands. Protection that starts by moving your money without asking is not protection. It is possession dressed as care. I took a slow breath and let the kettle sit silent. There are moments when the floor tilts just enough to demand a new stance. This was one. I didn't need a kitchen fight. I needed a plan. I scrolled to a number saved years ago. Patel, Anita. We met at a library book fair where she explained contracts to women who sold pies and quilts. She spoke in plain English and stayed after to answer questions no one else would. She answered on the third ring. "Adrian, how are you?" "I have a hearing notice with my name on it," I said. "Caleb and Sloan filed for conservatorship. I have proof of unauthorized logins, a document I never signed showing my signature, and 3 small transfers to an unknown account. I need you." Her voice stayed calm. "Come in this afternoon. Bring the letter, your laptop, and the bank statements. We start by preserving everything." Her office smelled of leather and new paper. The carpet softened each step. The window framed a stubborn magnolia. Anita waited while I stacked my papers. She read the notice, then drew 3 short lines on a legal pad. "First," she said, "we send preservation letters to the bank, estate platform, and your cell provider. That forces them to keep access logs, IP addresses, text records tied to security codes, and signature metadata. If the timeline is challenged, we'll have the chain intact. Second," she said, raising another finger, "schedule an independent capacity evaluation. I recommend Dr. Phoebe Hart. She'll document cognitive baseline, executive function, and financial judgment. Her report is evidence, not opinion. Third, a final finger, I file a motion for protective relief. We'll ask the court to block any temporary powers of attorney or guardianship actions until a full hearing, and order the petitioners not to touch your accounts or coverage. We'll also challenge any electronic signatures attributed to you citing the security anomalies. Your affidavit will anchor this." The cadence of her voice steadied me. "How long do we have?" "Not long," she said. "Enough." She turned the pad. "This is where you help me help you. List every account and portal. We change passwords and enable 2-factor authentication. Use text codes only to your phone. If possible, add a physical key. Then list anyone who can confirm your routine. Pharmacist, neighbors, doctor, not praise. Observations." "Marisol at the bank already flagged my accounts," I said. "She can testify about the attempted address change and guardianship. Requests." "Good," Anita said. "I'll bring in an investigator, Jonah Keats. He'll pull IP histories, device fingerprints, and session times. No screenshots, raw logs." She looked over her glasses. "Adrian, conservatorship petitions can make judges lean toward caution. We'll meet caution with clarity, no grand speeches, receipts." The kettle of my nerves hissed, then quieted. "Clarity I can do," I said. "I used to alphabetize 300 files every June. Give me a list. I'll check it twice." Anita smiled. She drafted the first preservation letter, reading key phrases aloud. "Please retain all access logs, IP address records, SMS code delivery times and numbers, and any e-signature metadata, including device IDs, and geolocation tags." The words sounded like sandbags laid along a riverbank before the rain. We finished the initial filings. Anita set down her pen. "One more thing. Don't confront them. Don't argue by text. If they call, keep it short, and keep a log of time and content. The courtroom is where we answer." I folded the notice and slid it into the envelope. For a moment, I let my hand rest on it, feeling the weight of other people's certainty about my life. Then I stood. "I can do quiet," I said, "and I can do steady." Outside, the magnolia held one open bloom. In the car, I placed the envelope on the passenger seat and touched the brass key in my pocket. The ribbon rasped against my skin, a small sound, but firm. I didn't know if love had brought us here, or if love had been the costume for something else. I only knew what I'd bring to the next door I faced. Preserved records, a clear mind, and a key I would not surrender. Jonah Keats showed up exactly on time, a worn messenger bag slung across his shoulder. If you didn't know his title, you might mistake him for a quiet librarian. His voice was measured, his movements deliberate, like he was used to coaxing facts out of hiding rather than chasing them down. He set his laptop on Anita's conference table and slid me a single sheet. "This is the preliminary timeline," he said. At the top was a date, the day before the insurance letter arrived. Below it, a column of IP addresses, geolocation tags, and device fingerprints. Jonah tapped the third line. "This one belongs to your home network. It shows a login to your estate portal at 9:14 a.m. That was you, correct?" "Yes. That's when I checked after seeing the insurance notice." He nodded, then pointed to the line above it. "This one is different. Same portal 2 days earlier at 3:27 p.m., originating IP traces back to Caleb's address. The device ID matches a MacBook registered to Sloan Pike." The words settled in the room like stones. Anita didn't react. She just wrote the time down. Jonah scrolled. "Here's where it gets specific. This entry, 10 minutes after the login, shows an electronic signature event, the metadata records device type, operating system, browser version, and geolocation. It's the same MacBook, same address. Signature applied to the estate amendment you showed me. That signature is listed under your name." I looked at the printed page. Seeing it in writing was worse than hearing it. I'd expected a shadow of doubt, some detail that would make it harder to trace. There wasn't one. He kept going. "I also pulled the audit logs from your bank. These 3 transfers, logistics, estate review, consulting, they were initiated from the same IP as the portal logins. That ties both actions to the same location and device." Anita leaned forward. "Chain of custody?" Jonah tapped his folder. "Preserved directly from the service providers. Each source gave me a certified export with hash verification. The originals are in cloud storage with read-only access. These printed copies are for reference only. If we present them, we'll produce the originals under seal." I didn't speak. My mind kept replaying the drive past Caleb's house, the sight of Nora's car in the driveway, the low murmur through the door. Hearing their voices that day had been like a splinter under the skin. Jonah's timeline was the tweezers pulling it into the light. He closed one file and opened another. There's one more piece. I subpoenaed records from Zoom for the week before the petition was filed. Sloan hosted 3 calls labeled guardianship strategy. 2 of them included a woman named Lillian Marks, an estate planning consultant in D.C. The 3rd call, he glanced at Anita, was with Caleb and Nora only. The description read, "Tone sympathetic." I reviewed the transcription flags. The term was used multiple times in connection with phrases like, "Mom doesn't understand," and "We just want her safe." Tone sympathetic. I could almost hear Sloane's voice saying it. Measured, low, the way she'd explain a delay at the airport to a gate agent. Anita's pen stopped moving. "We'll need a copy of that call." Jonah nodded. "Already requested. The host account will have a full recording." He slid the timeline toward me. "Everything here is admissible if the court accepts the foundation. You have direct links between your son's address, his wife's device, and the unauthorized activity. The bank and portal logs are aligned. The Zoom calls show premeditation." I traced a finger down the list of timestamps. Each one felt like a tick on a clock I hadn't heard until now. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was the same quiet satisfaction as balancing a school ledger at the end of the month. Numbers aligned, columns matched, everything accounted for. It didn't erase the work it took to get there. It just meant the math was true. "Thank you," I said, finally. Jonah gave a small nod. "I'll keep monitoring for any new access attempts. If there's another login, we'll catch it in real time." When he left, Anita gathered the papers into a neat stack. "This is strong," she said. "We'll attach it to the motion for protective relief. It's not just your word. It's the data speaking." I slid the brass key from my pocket, the ribbon trailing over my palm. In my mind, the red was brighter than before. Not because I was closer to winning, but because the door it unlocked was still mine to open. "Let's keep going," I said. The park sits on a low hill above the old train station, where the wind always moves first. I chose the same bench where Nora learned to balance on 2 wheels, wobbling past while Harold jogged backward with his hands out. I arrived early, faced the cracked path, and held the brass key in my pocket like a talisman. When Nora turned the corner, she hugged her jacket, although the afternoon was mild. Worry had arranged her into a smaller shape. "Hey, Mom." Her voice was low and unsteady. Then she tried for a smile that did not land. I nodded to the bench. She sat at the far end, as if we were still leaving room for a bicycle between us. "I got your text," she said. "You needed to talk. Is everything all right?" I opened the window in my chest and let air in. I received a letter canceling my insurance. It named a new legal guardian. I did not appoint one. The words lay between us. Birds worked at the grass. A train horn carried through the trees. Nora tightened her sleeves. "I did not know about the insurance," she said. "Sloan said paperwork would be easier if we centralized things. She asked me to witness a few forms so the clinic would not bother you with calls. She said it was just helping." "Helping whom?" I asked. "She said helping you. She said Caleb was handling it, and that it would be better if we took the load off. She said you have been tired. She said you forget small things." A maple seed pinwheeled to the path. I forget small things like where I set my reading glasses. I do not forget who I am. Her eyes shined, then steadied. "I should have asked you directly." "You could have. You still can." She looked over the hill to where the track curves and the town lifts beyond it. "Sloan is persuasive. She sounds so sure. When I said I felt uneasy, she said I was being childish. She said this is how responsible families work. She said I never step up." "When you were 9, I said, "you fell on that slope and scraped your knee. Harold told you to breathe while I held the handlebars so the bike would not run. You asked if you could quit. I said you could quit for a moment and then try again. Do you remember?" Nora gave a small laugh that ended quickly. "I remember the blue bandage with rockets. You tried again and rode to the picnic table. You were shaky, but you were steering. That is all I am asking you to do now." She turned toward me. I saw the girl who tied a red ribbon to my house key because she wanted our door to be easy to find. Sloan had me sign as a witness on 2 things, Nora said. One was a form saying you agreed to electronic signatures. The other was a statement about concerns for your decision-making. She said it was just to speed things up in case of emergency. She said there was no harm. Did you read them? I tried. She talks while you read, and then it feels rude to keep her waiting. I signed. I thought I was helping you rest. The truth sat between us like a third person. I let the silence widen, not as punishment, but as room for both of us to see what it held. I am sorry, Nora said. I did not mean to be on the wrong side of you. You are not on the wrong side of me, I said. You are on the far side of what is easy. That is where the right side usually lives. A gust lifted her hair. She tucked it behind her ear. What do you need me to do? First, tell me everything you witnessed or signed. Names, dates, who was present. Second, send me any texts or emails where Sloan discussed plans. Third, if anyone asks you to sign anything else, you tell them you will not. You can say your lawyer said no. Use me if you need to. I will hold that line. I can do that, she said. I want to fix what I broke. You did not break me, I said. You made a mistake. We will correct the record, and then we will lock the door the right way. She pulled a small notebook from her bag. I started writing things down after I heard Sloan say tone sympathetic on a call. It felt wrong in my stomach. I wrote the dates. I can forward screenshots. That will help, I said. Jonah will connect the logs. Anita will handle the filings. She took a breath that filled her shoulders. I keep thinking about how often you paid for everything without saying you were paying for everything. Lessons, trips, the time you fixed my car. You never said it like a bill. She exhaled. I thought helping Sloan was paying you back. You do not owe me a debt, I said. You owe yourself a standard. She wiped her cheek with the heel of her hand. I want to meet it. A freight train slid by, slow and metallic, a long sentence without commas. When it passed, the park felt wider. Nora shifted closer on the bench until our sleeves touched. Silence can be an answer, I said. But today I need your voice. I need you to stand in the truth you already know. I will, she said. Mom, I am here. I closed my fingers around the brass key until I felt the groove Harold filed decades ago. In Nora's damp eyes, I saw a younger version of myself at this bench, afraid to steer, and trying anyway. That girl learned to keep her balance. This woman can too. I let the old ache fall away, the way a scab loosens when the skin beneath has mended. Good, I said. Now we begin. The woman at the grocery register held my carton of milk in one hand and my card in the other. I'm sorry, ma'am. It says declined. Do you have another form of payment? Her voice was polite, but the line behind me was impatient, a small tide pressing forward. I felt the sting in my cheeks before the heat. Let me try again, I said. Same beep, same decline. I paid with the cash I'd set aside for laundry, slid the milk and bread into my bag, and walked out into the early evening air that felt sharper than it should. The next morning, the letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address beyond the insurance company's logo. Inside, the language was clean and cold. Your health coverage has been terminated at the request of your newly appointed legal guardian. My name appeared twice. Their name did not. I read it twice, then a third time, the words settling into my stomach like stones. A part of me wanted to sit at my kitchen table, make tea, and wait for someone to knock on the door so I could hand them their mistake. But there was no mistake. Not in their system. In their system, I was already someone else's responsibility. I packed an overnight bag instead. 3 changes of clothes, my toiletries, the brass key with its frayed red ribbon, and the spiral notebook I'd been using for names and dates. My house still smelled faintly of the lavender cleaner I'd used the day before. I locked the door behind me, letting the key turn slow, hearing the click as though it might not be mine to turn much longer. The motel was 6 miles from my street, near the exit for the highway. I'd passed it 100 times without ever looking at it directly. Beige stucco, a row of doors like unblinking eyes, and a neon vacancy sign that stuttered once before staying lit. At the front desk, the clerk slid the registration card toward me. "How many nights?" "2 to start," I said. My voice sounded steady, but I could feel the thin vibration underneath. She handed me a brass key with a plastic fob. The number was painted in white, chipped at the edges. I walked the narrow corridor to the door, hesitated with the key in my hand. That hesitation, standing on the threshold, was not about the room. It was about choosing to be here, choosing not to sleep in my own bed where they might find me, choosing myself over familiarity. I stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and something older beneath it. A queen bed with a floral bedspread, a small table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a television bolted to the wall. The curtains were heavy, meant to keep light out. I set my bag down on the bed and sat beside it. I took out the spiral notebook and opened to a clean page. The pen felt warm from being in my purse. I wrote at the top, "Letter to them." I did not write "Dear" or any name. I simply began, "If tomorrow I lose in that courtroom, I will still have myself. You can take access, titles, and even my home address, but you cannot take the choice to be me. I have lived too many years, through too many nights of unpaid bills and too many mornings of early buses to hand my dignity to anyone who did not earn it. If you think my silence means consent, you have misunderstood me. My silence is a dam holding back more truth than you can carry. My signature is mine. My body is mine. And as long as I can hold a pen, the line you want will remain blank." I stopped there, folded the paper once, then again, slid it into the back pocket of the notebook. The letter would not be sent. It was a mirror, not a weapon. I changed into a soft sweater, one I'd bought on sale years ago and never worn because it felt too warm for the house. Here, the air conditioner hummed and the sweater was comfort. I made tea in the small coffee maker, using a bag I'd brought from home. The taste was faintly metallic from the tap water, but it was hot, and I held the mug until my fingers loosened. Outside, headlights swept past on the access road, brief interruptions of the dark. I kept the curtain drawn, but left a small gap to see the glow of the vacancy sign. Lying in the bed, I let my thoughts slow. The brass key rested on the nightstand, its ribbon frayed but unbroken. I touched it before turning out the light. I had not run away. I had stepped aside to see the field more clearly. In the quiet, I could almost hear Harold's voice, not telling me what to do, but reminding me of who I was when I decided things for myself. The kind of woman who bought the cheaper coat so her kids could have the bus pass. The kind of woman who fixed the same leaky faucet twice before asking for help. The kind of woman who did not quit unless she decided the game was not worth playing. This game was worth playing. It was my life on the board. I closed my eyes with that thought. If they wanted to call me incapable, they would have to do it while I stood upright, in my own words. And if they wanted my consent, they would have to find the paper where it was written, in my hand, by my choice. Tomorrow, the motel would still be here. So would I. The text came at 7:42 in the morning, while I was stirring sugar into my tea at the motel. A, are you free for coffee today? We should talk like family. The like family part sat wrong with me, like a stone in my shoe. It was from Sloane. She didn't say what it was about, but I didn't need her to. The last time she'd looked me in the eye, she was standing in my driveway, her hands folded in that way people do when they want to seem calm, but are already planning the next move. I took my time replying, sure, Cinnamon on 5th Street, 11 o'clock. The Cinnamon Bean had been my place for years, small enough that people kept their voices down, warm enough that no one could be too cold. The air inside always smelled faintly of baked apples and nutmeg. It was a room where bad news softened just a little around the edges. I got there early, chose the table near the window where the morning light fell long and thin. I ordered a cinnamon latte, the kind that leaves a faint dusting on your lip if you're not careful. The brass key with the red ribbon sat in my coat pocket, the weight of it like a reminder to keep my hands steady. Sloane walked in right on time, her hair swept back, her jacket a shade of gray that probably had a name like Dove or Pearl in a catalog. She smiled like we were two women meeting for a book club, not a negotiation. Adrian, she said, sitting down without asking. I'm glad you came. I nodded. You asked. She took a breath, leaning forward just enough to signal intimacy. I think there's been some misunderstanding about Caleb and me. We've been trying to make sure you're taken care of, but some of your finances, they're not as organized as they could be. We thought we'd help tidy them up, just for your peace of mind. Her voice was soft, low, carefully measured. It was the tone people use when coaxing a cat out from under a bed. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for her to think I might agree. Then I said, You're afraid of losing face. Her smile twitched. I wouldn't put it that way. I sipped my latte, the cinnamon warm on my tongue. I would. You're afraid of losing face. I'm afraid of losing myself. The words hung there, sharper than I'd expected, but steady. For a flicker of a second, something in her eyes shifted. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation. Then it was gone. You know we only want what's best for you, she said. I set my cup down. You want what's best for you, and I'm not for sale. She blinked, just once, before glancing at her watch. Well, I hope we can all find a way forward without making this harder than it has to be. I smiled then, just a little. So do I. We finished the rest of our drinks without touching the real subject again. She talked about a new client she was handling at work, about the weather, about how busy Caleb had been. I nodded in all the right places, the way you do when you already know the conversation is over. When the bill came, I reached for it before she could. She made a token protest, but I slid my card onto the tray. It cleared without a hitch this time, and I saw her notice. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of early winter. We walked to the corner together before parting ways. She turned left toward her car. I turned right toward mine. At the crosswalk, I stopped for a moment and watched her in the reflection of a shop window. The way she walked fast, shoulders tight, like she was already replaying the conversation in her head. checking for weak spots. I didn't need to watch for long. I'd said what I needed to say, and I'd left her with just enough quiet to wonder what I was planning next. Back at the motel, I wrote down the conversation word for word in my notebook. Every pause, every shift in tone, every phrase worth remembering. Not because I planned to use it against her yet, but because I didn't plan to forget it. Some games aren't won in a single move. You wait, you watch, you let the other player show their hand while you keep yours close. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do in a coffee shop is remind someone that you still know exactly who you are. I closed the notebook and set it beside the brass key on the nightstand. My pieces were still on the board, and the next move would be mine. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of air that made you feel as though decisions here had a weight no one could see. I sat at the long wooden table beside Anita Patel, my attorney, my hands folded neatly on the smooth surface. Across from us, Caleb and Sloane looked like they had dressed for a family portrait. Pressed collars, somber colors, the picture of concerned children. The hearing was supposed to be routine, Anita had said, just a preliminary matter. But when their attorney, a man with the sharp voice of someone used to being obeyed, rose to speak, my stomach tightened. "Your Honor," he began, "we submit into evidence a report from Dr. Leonard Mills, a geriatric specialist, detailing signs of cognitive decline and repeated forgetfulness in Mrs. Adrienne Cole." He said my name like it was already written in past tense. The bailiff carried a thin file to the bench. Judge Hammond, a tall man with hair more silver than gray, opened it and began to read. His brow furrowed slightly, just enough for me to see the words sinking in. Dr. Leonard Mills. I had never met him. Never even heard of him. Anita stood immediately. "Your Honor, we object to the admission of this report. Mrs. Cole has never been examined by Dr. Mills. This so-called evaluation is based entirely on hearsay from individuals with a clear financial interest in the outcome of this petition." The judge raised his hand for quiet. "Noted, Ms. Patel. However, for the purposes of this interim hearing, I will allow it to remain in the record. We are not making final determinations today." The rest of the morning blurred into procedural language and dates. When it ended, Judge Hammond leaned forward slightly. "Given the conflicting accounts and this new evidence, I am appointing a guardian ad litem to assess Mrs. Cole's best interests before we proceed. We'll reconvene in 6 weeks. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell like a closing door. I walked out into the hallway with Anita at my side. Caleb and Sloane trailed behind us, their voices low, but carrying just enough for me to hear necessary, and only trying to help. The words felt like sandpaper. Anita put a hand on my arm once we stepped into the crisp air outside. "This is a delay, Adrienne, not a defeat. The guardian ad litem will meet you, talk to you, review the facts. We'll make sure they see the truth." I nodded, but I kept my eyes on the courthouse steps. The marble was worn in the middle from years of feet taking the same, cautious descent. I took each step slowly, as though I might slip if I looked up too soon. Back at the motel, I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment. The room smelled faintly of the cinnamon coffee I'd brought back that morning. I set the cup on the table, still half full, and pulled open the nightstand drawer. Inside was my stack of plain stationery and the fountain pen I'd bought myself after my retirement party at the school. I had saved it for special letters. Apparently, this qualified. I sat down at the small desk by the window, clicked the pen open, and began to write. Not to Caleb or Sloan, not even to the judge. To myself. If you are reading this tomorrow, and the court has stripped away what you know you are, remember this. No one is coming to knock on the door to hand it back to you. Do not wait for permission to be yourself. Open the drawer. Take out the pen. Sign your own name. Over and over, if you have to. Do not let the ink run dry before you do. The words came quickly, almost too quickly for the pen to keep up. My handwriting was steady, the loops and lines exactly as they had been since I learned cursive in the 3rd grade. No decline here, I thought. When I finished, I folded the letter in half and slid it into the drawer beneath the pen. It wasn't for anyone else to read. Not yet. Maybe never. But I needed to know it existed. That night, I didn't watch television or read. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the hum of the motel's neon sign outside the window. It flickered every few seconds, a small, stubborn light refusing to go out. I thought about the phrase best interests and how often it gets twisted into something unrecognizable. My best interest was not to be managed, filed, and locked away. My best interest was to keep my name in my own hand, my decisions in my own voice. The brass key with the red ribbon sat on the nightstand. I reached over, let it rest in my palm for a moment, and then set it back down. It was still mine. For now. And that was enough to plan the next move. It started like one of those weeks at the school when a big inspection was coming. Everyone moving in quiet urgency, each task feeding the next. Only this time, the inspection was my life. Anita called me on a Tuesday morning. "We're shifting gears, Adrienne. I'm filing a subpoena for Caleb and Sloan's financial communications related to your accounts. We'll need corroborating statements." Her tone was brisk, but I could hear the undercurrent, a silent promise that she wasn't letting go. By Wednesday, Jonah was in my living room, his laptop open on the coffee table. The hum of its fan was the only sound for a while, until he sat back and exhaled. "Here's your audit log. Access from their home IP addresses. Late nights, days you were nowhere near a computer. And here," he clicked, and a screen of chat transcripts appeared. Zoom recordings. Sloan getting coached on how to sound concerned without sounding controlling. Tone sympathetic, they called it. The phrase lodged in my mind like a splinter. Thursday, Marisol met me at the bank after closing hours. The glass doors were locked, the lobby dim except for her desk lamp glowing over a stack of forms. She slid an affidavit across to me. "I've known you for 20 years, Adrienne. You have never once asked for a guardian to manage your accounts. I've notarized this myself." She tapped her pen where I should sign, her eyes steady on mine. Friday morning, Dr. Phoebe Hart arrived at my door with a soft leather bag and a small smile. "I'm not here to test you, Mrs. Cole. I'm here to meet you." The evaluation was thorough but gentle. Memory prompts, problem solving, even balancing a checkbook. When she left, she shook my hand. "I'll submit my report to the court directly. No signs of cognitive impairment. None." Saturday, Nora showed up unannounced. She carried a cardboard file box and the look of someone who had made a decision she couldn't take back. "I kept these," she said, setting the box on my kitchen table. Inside were printouts and screenshots, text messages from Sloan, coaching her on how to convince me to sign the power of attorney. She said it was for your safety, Nora whispered, but reading them now, it's clear. I didn't hug her. Not yet. But I rested my hand on the box and met her eyes. Thank you. By Sunday, my dining table was covered in neat stacks. Subpoena drafts, audit logs, affidavits, medical reports, message printouts. I worked through them slowly, methodically, the same way I used to grade essays. Back then, I'd circle missing commas and mark margins with careful notes. Now, I checked for dates, signatures, file numbers, making sure each piece was exactly where it needed to be. I thought of the years at that kitchen table, under the same yellow light, budgeting for Caleb's tuition, for Nora's dance lessons. Every dollar assigned a purpose, every line item balanced. It was the same discipline now, just with higher stakes. Midway through the afternoon, I found myself smiling, not out of joy, but at the precision of it all. They had underestimated me, thought I would be too rattled, too tired to comb through the details. But every page I reviewed was another stitch in the net I was weaving. When I finally stacked the last file, I took a deep breath and let the quiet fill the room. The brass key with the red ribbon hung from the cabinet knob, catching a sliver of late-day sun. I reached up, gave it a small tap with my finger, and listened to the faint ting. It was the same sound it had made the day I walked away from Caleb's porch. This wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt the ground under my feet again. The inspection might not be tomorrow, but when it came, every answer would be in order, every fact in place. And when they asked whose life this was, the paperwork would say what I already knew. It was mine. I wasn't there for what happened in their kitchen that night, but I've pieced it together from what Nora let slip and what Jonah's file showed. Caleb was at the counter, laptop open, the glow washing his face a pale gray. Sloane stood at the sink, scrubbing a coffee mug like it had wronged her. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound until he shut the laptop with more force than needed. "We're behind again," he said, voice low but sharp. "The contractor wants another 25 by Friday. Without it, the crew walks." Sloane set the mug down too hard, water splashing onto the counter. "I told you we shouldn't have taken the Henderson property. It's a money pit." "It's an investment," Caleb shot back. "And when it's done, it's worth triple. But we can't get there without—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Without what?" she pressed. "Without your mother's accounts." He didn't answer right away, just rubbed his temples, eyes darting toward the half-open mail on the table. A bill with red lettering, the corner of an overdue notice peeking out. "You said this was for her safety," Sloane went on, softer now. But with that edge, I knew too well. "You said she was forgetting things." Caleb let out a bitter laugh. "She still balances her own checkbook, better than I do. But she doesn't need all that money sitting there. Not when—" He broke off again, hands curling into fists. "Not when we're drowning?" Sloane finished for him. Silence hung heavy between them. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that settles in your chest, like a stone. He moved to the fridge, pulled out a beer, twisted the cap until it popped. "I'm trying to keep us afloat, Sloane. The market's slowing, banks are tightening. If we don't finish Henderson, if we can't cover the interest payments, then we lose the house," she said flatly. He didn't deny it. I imagine he leaned on the counter then, looking down into the amber liquid, seeing more of his own reflection than he wanted. He'd been the boy who once handed me a crumpled Mother's Day card, bought with lawn mowing money, who promised he'd always take care of me when I was old. Now he was 39, with the weight of a failing project pressing the air out of his lungs. But here's the thing. Desperation doesn't erase the line between right and wrong. It just makes people blur it until they can convince themselves it's gone. Sloane dried her hands and crossed the room. If we finish this, Caleb, we're set. We can pay her back. She won't even notice. But we have to be united on this. No hesitation. No guilt. He looked at her for a long time, and I wonder what he saw. His partner, his co-conspirator, or just the person willing to say out loud what he didn't want to admit he was already doing. Finally, he nodded. United. There's a temptation, telling this part, to frame it as a villain's pact, to make it cleaner, darker, easier to hate. But the truth is more complicated. They weren't cartoon thieves twirling mustaches. They were two people under financial strain, tangled in ambition and fear, convincing themselves that my security was negotiable because their comfort was slipping away. It's a dangerous kind of love, the one that excuses harm because you believe the end will justify the means. I've been on the other side of it, choosing long hours, tight budgets, and my own exhaustion, thinking I was sacrificing for the good of the family. It took me decades to realize that protecting someone doesn't mean controlling them. Maybe Caleb hasn't learned that yet. Maybe he won't. But seeing this, knowing this, forces me to hold two truths at once: that he is my son, and that he crossed a line that love doesn't excuse. The court would only see documents, statements, and testimony. They wouldn't see him in that kitchen, weighing the mortgage against my autonomy. They wouldn't hear the quiet in his voice when he agreed to Sloane's plan. But I carry that image, and it shapes how I fight. Not just to win, but to remind myself what's worth saving and what isn't. Because if love demands you surrender who you are, it's not love. It's a transaction. And I've spent my life paying into accounts I thought were for family. Turns out, some of them have been closed for years. The courtroom felt colder than it had in February, though it was late spring. The air carried a kind of stillness that made the sound of shuffling papers and chair legs echo louder than they should. I sat at the same table as before, my hands folded, the brass key with the red ribbon in my pocket like a steady pulse. Anita sat beside me, posture sharp, eyes scanning the bench as Judge Hammond took his seat. The clerk called the case, and the opposing attorney was first to stand. His words were measured but familiar. Phrases about concern for my welfare and patterns of forgetfulness. He gestured toward Caleb and Sloane, who sat angled toward the bench, hands clasped like penitent children. Then it was Anita's turn. She rose without a single sheet of paper in her hands, which I knew was deliberate. Your Honor, the evidence we present today will show not only that Mrs. Cole is fully capable of managing her own affairs, but that the petition for conservatorship was pursued using false statements, unauthorized access, and manipulation of third parties. She gestured toward Jonah at the back of the room. He stepped forward and placed a binder on the witness stand. This, Anita continued, is the audit log from Mrs. Cole's online accounts. Access occurred from IP addresses registered to the petitioner's home. Multiple entries correspond to dates and times when Mrs. Cole was verifiably elsewhere. Jonah pointed out the entries, each one marked with a timestamp, and location. The judge leaned closer to the screen as they scrolled. Anita moved to the next point. We also have evidence of unauthorized attempts to change account recovery options, which Mrs. Cole thwarted by enabling two-factor authentication. This demonstrates not only her competence, but her active management of her own finances. Then came the recordings. The grainy sound of a Zoom call filled the speakers. Sloane's voice, slightly distorted, but clear enough. Remember, tone, sympathetic. We want her to believe this is for her own good. I didn't look at them while it played. I kept my gaze on the judge. Next was Dr. Hart. Her testimony was calm, professional, and unshakable. I conducted an independent evaluation of Mrs. Cole. There is no evidence of cognitive decline or memory impairment. In my professional opinion, she is fully capable of managing her personal, medical, and financial affairs. Finally, Anita brought Nora forward. My daughter held a small box as if it weighed more than it should. She testified about the text messages, about how she was told to convince me to sign the power of attorney. I thought I was helping, she said softly, but reading them again, it was wrong. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the clerk's pen. Anita concluded simply, "Your Honor, this petition is not about protection. It is about control. And the law does not grant control over a competent adult without clear and compelling evidence, which we have shown does not exist here." Judge Hammond sat back, hands folded, his gaze moving between both tables. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of finality. The petition for conservatorship is denied. Furthermore, this court warns the petitioners that any further attempts to interfere with Mrs. Cole's legal or financial autonomy without just cause may result in sanctions or other legal remedies. Mrs. Cole is entitled to live her life without unwarranted intrusion. The gavel came down once, crisp and final. I didn't smile. I didn't even glance toward Caleb or Sloane. I just let out a slow breath I felt all the way down to my fingertips. It wasn't triumph that filled me. It was something steadier, quieter. The kind of victory you don't celebrate out loud, because it's not about winning over someone else. It's about winning yourself back. As we stood to leave, Anita leaned toward me. "You did more than defend yourself today, Adrian. You set a record. This was clean." I nodded, my voice low. "Let's keep it that way." Outside the courthouse, the air was warmer, the sky a pale blue streaked with high clouds. I slipped my hand into my pocket and felt the key. It was still there. It had always been there. This time, I didn't tap it for luck. I held it like proof. The courtroom was small, paneled in dark wood that seemed to drink in the light. I sat beside Anita at the respondent's table, my hands resting on a single legal pad, not because I needed to write anything, but because it felt good to hold on to something of my own. The brass key with the red ribbon lay in my coat pocket, cool against my palm when I slipped my hand in for reassurance. The clerk called the case, and the petitioner's attorney rose first. His voice was smooth, practiced. He spoke about concern for my well-being and recent lapses in judgment, painting a picture of a woman too fragile to steer her own life. Caleb and Sloane sat behind him, angled toward the bench, eyes forward, faces neutral. When he finished, Anita stood. No papers in her hand, just her voice, steady and clipped at the edges. "Your Honor, the evidence before you will show that Mrs. Adrienne Cole is not only competent, but that this petition is rooted in unauthorized access, fabricated concern, and coordinated efforts to seize control of her estate. She called Jonah first. He walked to the stand with a binder under one arm. "These are the audit logs from Mrs. Cole's online financial accounts," Anita said, showing repeated access from IP addresses registered to the petitioner's residence. Each login occurred on dates when Mrs. Cole was verifiably elsewhere. Jonah spoke in plain terms: IP traces, timestamps, device IDs, turning technical proof into something the judge could picture. Anita followed with, Mrs. Cole responded by enabling two-factor authentication, further demonstrating her active, capable management of her accounts. Next, the speakers crackled to life with the sound of a Zoom call. Sloane's voice came through, slightly tinny, but clear. "Remember, tone, sympathetic. We want her to believe this is for her own good." I kept my eyes on Judge Hammond, not on them. His pen paused over his legal pad. Then came Dr. Hart. She was calm, composed, speaking without embellishment. I conducted an independent cognitive evaluation. Mrs. Cole shows no evidence of impairment. Her memory, reasoning, and executive function are intact. She is fully capable of managing personal, medical, and financial affairs. Finally, Anita called Nora. My daughter stepped forward holding a small file box. Her voice wavered at first, but steadied. She told the court how she had been urged to convince me to sign a power of attorney, how she'd believed it was helping. But when I read the messages again, she said, lifting the printouts, it was manipulation, and it was wrong. Anita ended without theatrics. Your Honor, the law does not permit the removal of an adult's autonomy without clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. No such evidence exists here. What exists is a record of intrusion and coercion. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Judge Hammond leaned back, hands folded, gaze moving between us. His voice was measured when it came. The petition for conservatorship is denied. The court finds Mrs. Cole competent to manage her own affairs. Petitioners are hereby warned that any further attempts to interfere with her autonomy without lawful cause may result in sanctions, including financial penalties and referral for criminal investigation. The gavel struck once, firm and final. I didn't smile. I didn't turn to see Caleb's or Sloane's faces. Instead, I drew in a slow, steady breath, letting it fill me all the way to my fingertips before releasing it. This wasn't triumph in the way people imagine. It was quieter, heavier, the kind that settles into your bones. Anita touched my arm as we stood. "This is as clean a win as it gets," she murmured. Outside, the air felt warmer than when we'd gone in. I slipped my hand into my pocket, wrapped my fingers around the key, and held it there. Not for luck, not for hope, but as proof that what was mine was still mine. The office smelled faintly of lemon oil and old leather, the kind of scent that made me think of libraries and long-settled agreements. Anita slid the final set of documents across the polished desk toward me. The edges were crisp, the ink still smelling faintly metallic. "This," she said, tapping the top page, "is the formal revocation of any prior power of attorney. It's already been recorded with the county and sent to every financial institution you use." I read it once, slowly, my eyes tracing each word like it was a stitch in a seam. Then I signed, my pen moving in a steady arc. Anita turned to the next stack. "This," she continued, "is the irrevocable trust. We've named Nora as the successor beneficiary of the house. Ellie is designated as beneficiary for the trust's liquid assets. And, per your instructions, a charitable fund is established for the soup kitchen grace runs, with an annual disbursement set in perpetuity. I looked at the language, the careful phrases. Irrevocable. In trust. Without reservation. There was a strange calm in seeing my intentions locked into words the law couldn't bend for anyone's convenience. I've made sure there's no room for challenge, Anita said. Your wishes stand, regardless of who tries what, later. I signed again. This time, I paused for a moment with the pen still in my hand, thinking of Ellie's laugh echoing in the diner booth, the way Grace always slid an extra roll into my bag without charging me, the way Nora had stood in that courtroom, voice shaking but clear. Anita gathered the signed pages, stacking them neatly, her hands precise. Do you want me to send copies to Caleb? I shook my head. I'll handle it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the low glow of the lamp. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. In front of me, a manila envelope lay open. Inside, I placed 3 things. First, a copy of the court's decision, the embossed seal catching the light. Second, the formal revocation, clear, unambiguous, permanent. And finally, a single piece of lined paper, folded once. On it, in my own hand, I'd written, I did not shout. I signed. No salutation, no signature, just the truth, distilled. I sealed the envelope, pressing the flap down with the side of my palm, feeling the paper fibers catch under my skin. Then I pulled on my coat, the brass key heavy in the pocket, and stepped out into the cool night. Caleb's house was only a few blocks away. The streetlights painted the sidewalks in long, broken strips of amber. When I reached his porch, I set the envelope carefully on the welcome mat, weighing it with a smooth riverstone from my own garden. A small thing, but it would keep the wind from taking it before they did. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I turned and walked back down the steps, the ribboned key swinging gently in my pocket, and the only sound was the soft hum of my own breath in the night air. Some victories you don't announce. You don't need to. They exist in the space between what they tried to take and what you chose to protect. And mine was written now, sealed in ink, filed in the records, and resting on a doormat where the weight of it would be felt without a single word exchanged. When I got home, I made tea, chamomile, steeped until the water turned a soft golden brown. I sat at the table with my hands wrapped around the cup, steam touching my face like a quiet blessing. The papers were gone from my sight now, but I knew they'd done their work. Justice doesn't always come in the form of a verdict read aloud. Sometimes it's a stack of signed pages, a trust no one can undo, a letter with fewer than 10 words. Sometimes it's the knowledge that the next time someone tries to write your story for you, they'll find the pen already in your hand. It was early evening when I saw him standing at the gate. The air was cool, tinged with the faint smell of wood smoke from someone's chimney down the block. Caleb's hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket, his shoulders slightly hunched, like a man trying to make himself smaller. I stepped onto the porch, not hurrying, letting the wood boards creak under my steps. We stood like that for a moment, me on the porch, him just beyond the gate. Mama. His voice was quiet, and I could hear the strain in it. I know you did everything you could for us, all these years. The words hung there between us, heavy but without a place to land. I thought of the times I'd stayed up past midnight at the kitchen table, bills spread out, trying to stretch my paycheck so he could go on the school trip. The trip so Nora could get new cleats for soccer. I thought of the meals skipped so there'd be enough for them to eat. I walked down the steps slowly, stopping on the path a few feet from the gate. "You pay your debts, Caleb," I said, my voice steady. "I'm paying mine, the one I owe to myself." He blinked, and for a second I saw the boy he used to be, the boy who brought me a dandelion bouquet from the yard, grinning like it was treasure. But behind his eyes was the man I had seen in court, the man who had tried to take what wasn't his. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small white card. "Debt counseling," I said, holding it out through the gap in the gate. "They're reputable. They'll help you if you let them." He took it, his fingers brushing mine for just a moment before he pulled back. There was no hug, no lingering touch. We both knew this wasn't a moment for sentiment. Not yet. "This isn't easy," he said, eyes dropping to the gravel at his feet. "Most things worth doing aren't," I replied. "You'll figure it out." We stood there a moment longer, the air carrying only the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a passing car. I kept my hands in my pockets, feeling the weight of the brass key with the red ribbon, a reminder of the boundaries I'd fought to keep. He glanced up once more, as if expecting me to invite him in. I didn't. Some doors stay closed until trust can walk through them without asking. When he finally turned and walked away, I watched until he reached the corner, the white card still in his hand. Then I went back inside, shutting the gate behind me with a quiet click. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start, and sometimes the start is all you can give. Sunday came with a kind of warmth that felt rare this late in the year. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, soft and golden, touching everything with an easy glow. Nora was at the counter, arranging plates and silverware with the precision of someone who wanted the table to be just right. Ellie sat at the end, swinging her legs as she carefully unwrapped a sheet of brown craft paper. She turned it toward me with both hands. It was a drawing, our house, with 3 figures standing in front. The lines were simple but sure, the colors bright and certain. One figure had silver hair, the other 2 flanking her on each side. Ellie's smile was shy, like she wasn't sure if she'd gotten it right. "You did," I told her. "It's beautiful." Nora came over to look, her hand brushing Ellie's shoulder. "She worked on it all week," she said. I glanced toward the far wall of the kitchen, where a small wooden hook held the brass key on its red ribbon. That key had been mine for decades, more than a way to open a lock. It had been my proof, my anchor, my reminder that some things in life are still under your hand. "Come here," I said, nodding toward the hook. They both followed as I walked over. I reached up and took the key down, feeling the cool weight of it settle into my palm. For a moment, I just held it there, my fingers brushing the worn edges of the ribbon. Memories clung to it. Rainy mornings fumbling with groceries, the sound of the latch clicking shut at night, the day I first hung it on that hook as a promise to myself that this home would always be mine. I turned to Nora and held out my hand. She looked from the key to my face, confusion flickering across her features. "Hold it," I said. Her fingers closed slowly around the brass, as if she were afraid it might burn. "Keep it safe," I told her. "A door that's closed isn't always locked. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right hand to open it again. Now you have the key." Her eyes glistened, and I could see her swallow back something she wasn't ready to say aloud. Ellie leaned against her side, staring at the ribbon like it was a treasure. Nora nodded. "I'll keep it safe." I stepped back, letting my hand fall to my side. "It's not just a key," I said quietly. "It's a reminder of trust, of what we fought for, and of what we don't take for granted anymore." The kitchen filled again with the smells of lunch, fresh bread, roasted chicken, and the faint sweetness of the jam Nora had opened. The table was set now, plates gleaming in the sunlight, Ellie's drawing propped against the vase in the center. I didn't sit right away. Instead, I stood for a moment longer, watching them, the key now resting in Nora's open palm as Ellie traced its edges with one curious finger. It struck me then that some things you fight to keep, and others you fight to pass on. And this was both. I wrote the letter in my favorite chair, the one by the window where the afternoon light falls just right across the pages. The paper was thick, the kind that feels like it can hold something more than words. At the top, in neat handwriting, I wrote her name, Ellie. I began simply. If anyone ever tells you they are protecting you, look at the papers they hold. If those papers keep your choices safe and your name intact, they are truly protecting you. If they don't, if they take away your say, then it isn't protection, no matter how gentle the words sound. I paused there, picturing her years from now, reading these lines when she might need them most. The right signature can open a door, I wrote, but the wrong one can lock it for good. Remember this, my sweet girl. Whoever guards your future must be someone who guards your voice first. When the letter was folded and sealed, I placed it in the drawer where I keep family things that matter. Not for now, but for later. Later that week, Grace stopped by the house. She carried a brown envelope, the kind that had clearly been folded and refolded on the way over. Inside was the invoice from the soup kitchen's latest repair, the new oven they'd needed for months. But on the back, in Grace's looping handwriting, she had drawn a simple sketch. A door, slightly ajar, with light spilling out. She smiled as I turned the paper over. "Thought it might look good on your fridge," she said. I traced the outline of that door with my finger. "And I have the key," I told her. That night, as the house settled into its quiet, I thought about all the doors in my life, ones slammed shut, ones I'd been locked out of, and the rare ones I'd opened for myself. This last one felt different. It didn't open with noise or force. It opened with a signature and the steady hand that held the pen. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to slam anything. I didn't shout. I signed. Before we say goodbye, I want to speak to you, the one listening right now. If you've ever had someone's care turn into control, if you've ever been told it's for your own good while feeling the walls close in, you know the weight of those words, and you know the power of taking your voice back. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, sunlight warming your kitchen table? Or a late night when stories like this keep you company and remind you you're not alone? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing, not just to hear more stories like this, but to join a community that still believes in kindness, in healing, and in second chances. Thank you for giving me your time today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. And remember, Sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to turn the key and open your heart. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.